Today is the 4th day of the August 89 7-day retreat in Springwater. Changes in weather are amazing, aren't they? It's cool. Can it be felt in the same way as the heat, the humidity? The conditions change, but can the feeling of it, the perception, the listening, be the same? Without judgment or comment. Before this last round of sitting, I took a nap, which I always do after breakfast. Sleep quite deeply. And in waking up, just in waking up, there was this thought, I have nothing to talk about. And instantly, certain physical sensations, which we describe with sinking feeling or anxiety or dis-ease. That's the word we put on these feelings, but there's a definite chemical ongoing in this body, producing some uncomfortable feeling. Getting up, getting dressed, straightening the bed, it wasn't there so much anymore. But I thought I will look at that when I have a round of sitting. I'll look at this whole thing of thinking, I have nothing to say, or what am I going to say? And that physical feeling that we label anxiety or. And in evoking the thought, there was no feeling. And it's amazing to note how a thought, when it's not accompanied by the well-known physical sensations of in stomach or intestines, heart or wherever, all over. When those are not there, then there's just the thought. And it's a fact, one doesn't know what to talk about yet. But what of it? When the physical feelings are there, then they signal to the brain, as it were, there's something to be afraid of. And if the brain receives that signal, there's something to be afraid of from the body, which manifests these symptoms, and it starts scanning around for danger. And it'll always find one. Always find something to be afraid of. Now you could say, I could ask, why was the physical sensation not there in sitting down here and bringing up the same thought that occurred in this moment of half waking and still half sleeping? Is it that with the state of sitting with awareness, this connection between thought and physical symptoms, physical manifestations is severed, that the energy of attention severs that connection, doesn't allow the energy to flow into this whole apparatus. And will one immediately say this is because of the sitting, therefore one should sit? We can't sit all the time. Or is it that at the moment of waking up there wasn't that attention, and therefore the old established connections were functioning? So, next time to try out not getting up, if one has that possibility, one doesn't have to meet a timeline, one can just lie down there and see whether the same thing is possible in lying down or walking around. Although I think all of us who do sitting here in the retreat, and maybe at home, at certain times, can agree that there is something to sitting quietly with a fairly straight back, without thrashing about it with every change of thought, which we usually do, a change of thought and we move around, an uncomfortable thought and we do all kinds of motions to fight it or avert it or deny it. That's not all conscious. So, sitting quietly, listening, is definitely a different state from barely waking up from sleep and dream. The energy flows differently somehow. Necessarily so? I don't know. That's for each one of us to play with, to experiment with. Because we all know that one can sit down with a head full of anxiety-producing thoughts, and the sitting does not sever the connection. And yet, there may be the possibility, by not thrashing about to avert or escape from the thoughts, by quietly looking and listening to all the discomfort that has been aroused and is being sustained by more thoughts, to find an order in all of that. By that I mean, what is happening? What is going on? Let me trace this out, not me. Let the brain reveal what it is doing, and the body. And in that, energy gathers in attending, in looking and listening. Because there is an intention to find out. An interest, we often say. A curiosity. An urgency. To find order in the chaos, as we said in one of the first talks. Order meaning, what is the pattern here? What is going on? And this question already has an impact. Which cannot always be easily described. Which brings me to the first question that someone asked. Which was something like that. In spite of what you say, that there is no practice, needs to be no practice, this attention comes on its own. There is something we can do to remind ourselves to be attentive. There must be something that one can use to bring the mind here. Bring it to attention out of the state of reverie or fantasy or compulsive activity. And not just mental activity, but the whole body participating in this compulsive activity. And the person related that a friend who has a clock, a watch with a little alarm device, sets that alarm device on, I don't remember what the interval was, and at a certain interval there's a beep which reminds the person to be here. Someone else told me that too once. And my question to her was, do you feel that you are becoming dependent on that watch to bring you to attention? And she just laughed and laughed. I don't think I ever got an answer. But we don't want to ridicule this, we want to look at it. Because we all feel a need for being here, or a desire for being here, whatever we mean by that. At least not be caught up in disagreeable things. I don't know how much of a need for being here we feel when we're involved in agreeable fantasy and pleasant, blissful states, being the experiencer of bliss. Do we feel we should set an alarm to get us out of that? Or would we want any reminder to stay away as long as possible so that this bliss can endure? I'm talking of a state in which there is an experiencer and a doer who has brought about the state of bliss by certain practices, which is possible. With certain repetitive practices to affect the brain in such a way that it produces certain waves which are experienced as blissful. And in that process there is a thought, a doer, a following of method, and a desired goal, which is then savored. The state is savored by the experiencer, which is all of which is a dualistic affair. Me and my state. Me and my ability to produce it. Me and my practice. And my practice versus the rest of my life, which is anything but blissful. So, all of us are aware of the difficulty in which we live most of the time, conflict, feeling pressured, maybe harassed, not enough time, doing things we don't want to do, feeling dominated by the work situation, by the family situation, having difficult relationships, unpleasant relationships with maybe our co-workers or friends at home or whatever. The discontent with our daily life, with the way we live. Rushy, without leisure, without being here, always thinking of what we have to get done to get to the next thing. And wondering whether there isn't something that can pull us out of that. Not during a retreat. A retreat, there are ways in which one can come to, it happens. But in one's daily life. And then the question which we started out with, is there some way of reminding ourselves to be attentive? Setting ourselves some kind of a thing, not maybe a clock, but a person said, whenever I see somebody rushing down the hall, that's a reminder for me to stop and just be here. Well, let's take that nobody is rushing down the hall. What will the reminder be? How many reminders do we need? Or put the question the other way around, why is not everything a reminder? The plane overhead, the falling leaf, the person moving, the insects chirping. Of course, in an air-conditioned building, there are no insects chirping, but there's the air conditioner humming. Can that be a reminder? What does it mean to be reminded, reminded? It means, doesn't it, to wake up. From unconsciousness, non-awareness. Of course we're conscious, but not aware most of the time. And having a device, a clock, or something that one sets oneself up for, if I see somebody rushing, then I will wake up. Will one wake up? What is this here-ness that follows the clock? Is one really there? which means one is not there. There's just what's going on. Without this busy, anxious, desiring, fearful self-center. That wants to be aware. Aware meaning waking up, coming out of a undesirable state, a painful state. One wants to wake up out of a painful state into something else. But what is the painful state? Can that be the reminder? The pressure on the chest, every mental pressure expresses itself physically too. Can one wake up to exactly what is going on? Why doesn't the pain of our day-to-day, moment-to-moment living wake us up? The danger in which we live by living inattentively. Why doesn't that wake us up? I'm not saying it should, but isn't there every moment something to look at, to listen to feel and touch with a mind that is not prejudiced, doesn't want something better or something different, but this says, yes, what is it? That's what being here is. Being with whatever is. Do we really want that? Are we really interested in that? The lostness, the loneliness, the pain of just having lost someone. Someone died, someone left one. The pain of that, the sadness, deep sorrow. Will one be with that? Completely? And by that, not meaning wallowing in it, becoming a victim of that, and therefore emerging as someone again who has a role to play. And we're attached to the roles that we play because they give meaning to our life. And the role of the victim is one of those meanings that we may hold on to in the presence of sorrow and pain. Can that be seen as it happens? Not just be completely with the sorrow, but what the mind makes out of it, what thought makes out of it. It takes listening to how we talk to ourselves, about our condition. And that's possible. And out of that emerges this moment of being something, and maybe questioning this moment whether one needs to be anything in the presence of what is, be it sorrow, pain, loneliness, or deep joy. To find out by observing, not just by suffering as a sufferer or experiencing as an experiencer, but by watching thought and feeling. One may find out that the mind wants to make something out of everything. It's the brain's function to symbolize and store for future reference. Symbolize, remember in symbols and store it. It's very helpful for survival in the woods, on the prairie, animals, forest fires. Plants that one tastes and tries out, some of which give one a stomach ache, maybe kill one. To remember and store and learn from memory, a very vital function of the brain. But the brain does not discriminate. It tries to remember, symbolize, and store everything, and associate things that happen closely in time and space, whether they belong together or not. Just the closeness in time and space is stored. So something may remind one of something fearful that happened. And so this thing, which isn't fearful at all, was just happening to be a tree standing by, an accident one may be afraid of this tree. So can one become aware how the mind goes to work as something is experienced, as one comes to, is presently here with pain and sorrow, or anger or jealousy. The thought of me, the sufferer of it, and the thought of I must get even for that. We've touched upon that. I touch upon it very often because it's so important to see that happening in oneself and wonder if it has to continue. Because all of our global conflicts on the small and large level are based on this principle. Having to get even. Retaliate for the retaliation. Kidnap for the kidnapping. To avenge. To get even. And it happens on this in this small theater, which is our mind and body. And there we can watch it taking place, emerging in thought, maybe not in action. Maybe we're too timid or afraid. But in thought we can avenge and retaliate and get even. Becoming a victor in addition to being a victim. None of this is said judgmentally. It's where we miss the mark. Where instead of just being with the hurt of someone leaving us, someone dying or someone insulting us, instead of just being with the hurt, the sadness, the pain, the sorrow, to make something out of it. And therefore not being completely with what's there, but spinning a net of thought and possible action. And the spider usually sits right in the middle of the net. So, what will remind us in our daily life to look and listen? The person said, here, the birds do that. One hears the birds and one starts to listen. Or is it the other way around? One starts to listen and they're the birds. Things happen so fast that one may not be accurate about the sequence in which they happen. Because if one is very much engrossed in thought about oneself, one's suffering or one's possible future pleasures, one may not hear the birds at all, even though they're cawing away. So, what will make us listen? What will bring about an opening of the mind and body? To fully perceive, to fully and wholly perceive what's there this instant. Is it that one has been through so much pain, so much hurt, also the hurt of having hurt others, the guilt about having hurt others? That there sort of arises a feeling, I will not go through this again. Not I will avoid it in terms of distracting myself, but I will pay attention. There can be this resolution, but do resolutions work? One has to try it out. One may find in a situation the resolution is not remembered and one is right back in the same conditioned responses of defending or attacking or hurting, getting hurt and blaming. Or will, at the very moment that the hurt is about to happen, or that the hurting remark is about to come out of through the vocal cords, out of the mouth, can there be attention there before it happens? Brings to mind this famous Zen saying, hear the bell before it rings. This is not a commandment, it's a question. Is it possible to hear the bell before it rings? One has been through a whole thing of conflict and suffering and sorrow and division. And one wonders, honestly, seriously, innocently, whether it has to keep on going and going and going. One doesn't know the answer, but one is interested. And because one is interested, one is watching. Not to protect oneself, but to find out whether what has gone on for centuries and centuries among human beings, causing each other so much sorrow and hurt, whether it has to continue in this human being here that has the capacity, at least at times, to look and listen without a motive, just to find out what's happening or what's about to happen this moment. And one may find to one's utter amazement that not our usual notion of action is necessary. That awareness itself has intelligent action. Which is also loving and compassionate without any intention to be so. Because as one just imagines all of this, one would say, well, if I am aware, well, what will I do then? Be aware and see. Awareness itself is action. Because it is not reaction, conditioned reaction to the past, arising from memory. It comes out of looking and listening now. Not just to the beauty of the setting moon in the morning. That's easy to watch, isn't it? The fresh air, the fragrance of wet grass and earth, and a round orange moon setting in the west. But maybe from such utter beauty, maybe from that comes the energy also to be with a pain or fear of not knowing whether one will succeed or not, whether one will make it, whether one will ever be happy again. The energy to face that completely. Not as an idea, but as an actual manifestation throughout this body, which is not really divided into mind and body. There is no separation. A thought is neurochemical, electrical stuff. If one wonders, as many people do, where will I get the energy to watch? Because one notices that when there is energy gathering, then it's easier to be attentive. Not necessarily so, but so if one wonders where will I get the energy in my daily life, which is so full of distractions, stimulations, things I need to get done. can one approach one day with some reason, just looking, observing, maybe keeping mental or direct note of how one spends one's day. And wondering whether one has to do all the things that one is doing, or whether some of them just sort of happen out of habit, albeit absorbing lots of energy. And is one doing other things? Is there time for doing things which are helpful? Like getting some fresh air, exercise, walking. Some leisure time, maybe half an hour. Some time for quietness, maybe 5 minutes. Where does the energy go? It can be observed. Does one have to do all the things one does? Can one find time to do the things one thinks one has no time for? Because of habitual activities. We are all very inert bodies, aren't we? It's a physical law. Every body is inert unless set in motion by an outside force. It's only limited truth. But that limited truth is very palpable, isn't it? A lot of the time, how inert one is to let go of something that one knows is just sapping the energy. I don't want to be specific because and it looks like finger pointing. We have to observe for ourselves. Allow intelligence to come into being in looking and attending to what is happening. And as to reliance upon the outside force to set one into motion, it's a very risky thing, isn't it? We crave this outside force, the structure, the teacher, the authority, to push us, tell us what to do, regulate our lives for us. And with that comes addiction to that force, dependency, and the atrophying of something that can happen with it. Looking, questioning, and doing for oneself. We'll talk about the self maybe tomorrow. I don't want this to be misunderstood. But not depending on this outside force. Because if we do, we atrophy. Or atrophy means something that's there atrophies, or one can say something has no space and ground, soil to come into being, because everything is done from the outside. So where are we right now? Without knowing. We will end here for today.